Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today, September the 19th, 2024. It has been 3,888 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 211 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, 2 years and 208 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression, and 45 days since Ukraine counter-invaded Russia. Today's podcast covers the events that happened on Wednesday and Thursday morning and catches up on some stories from earlier in the week. There were only minor changes to the map yesterday. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mail bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. It's unchanged from yesterday, so if you want to skip ahead, I don't mind. I won't even know. 1. It is highly likely United States military aid to Ukraine will end on September 30th, 2024, beyond already committed deliveries and funding, and will not be readdressed until February 2025. 2. We maintain that the loss of assistance from the United States has the potential to be catastrophic for the Ukrainian armed forces. 3. The lack of leadership by the United States risks starting a global arms race as countries re-evaluate their political relationships and seek to secure their national security through their own means. 4. The lack of a meaningful response by Ukraine's allies and international organizations to open and unrestricted attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure by Russia has convinced Moscow this is an effective strategy with no political consequences. 5. Russia will maintain its attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, continuing Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022. As outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. 6. The continued attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have caused critical damage, creating an environment where an accident at one or more of Ukraine's nuclear power plants is possible. 7. The policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States is a complete failure that has only encouraged Russia to escalate hybrid and kinetic warfare actions against the NATO alliance and Ukraine's allies and their economic interests. 8. The failed policies of the NATO alliance are increasing the probability of nuclear proliferation and an expansion of the Russia-Ukraine war into the European continent. 9. While Russian forces continue to make gains, we assess that it will be difficult to maintain the current operational tempo due to unsustainable losses of heavy equipment and personnel. 10. We maintain the Kursk Counter-invasion is strategically sound. 11. Autocrat Vladimir Putin's order to recapture the Kursk region of Russia by October 1st is unrealistic and extremely unlikely. 12. The Russian economy is much weaker than reported. 13. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. Here is today's action report summary. Yesterday, Russia carried out 187 discrete assaults, and through September the 18th, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks climbed to 165. The VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, carried out at least 79 airstrikes, dropping 127 bombs. And Russian ground units carried out almost 4,600 fire missions and used over 1,400 one-way drones. In the Kursk region, Ukraine controls 1,051 square kilometers, with another 316.5 in the grey zone, for a total area of 1,367.5 square kilometers. There are two breaches. The first, from Nikolaeva-Daryina to Kucherov, is 70 kilometers wide, and the second, at Novy Put, is 22 kilometers. Ukrainian forces are up to 26 kilometers in depth from the main breach at Sudzha and up to 5.5 kilometers deep from the second breach at Novy Put. Ukraine controls 83 hamlets, villages and settlements, including important infrastructure facilities such as the Sudzha gas metering facility. Of those, 27 are under administrative control of the provisional government. Let's go into the details of what happened on the battlefield. This would be a good time to open up the war map on a second device and find the city of Sumy, that's in northeastern Ukraine. There is a link to the map in the podcast description. Ready? Here we go. Because there was a lot of fighting yesterday with very little change to the line of conflict, instead of listing off dozens of towns and saying no change, I am going to focus on where things did change. Oleksiy Dmitrashkivsky, a representative of the Ukrainian military commandant's office in the Kursk Oblast, told the Associated Press that Ukrainian forces had halted the Russian advances in the Koreniva region. Quote, "They tried to attack from the flanks, but they were stopped there. The situation was stabilized, and today everything is under control. They are not successful." There was a satellite pass by Sentinel-2LA yesterday, and it did indicate there was very little change in the areas of fighting over the last 3 days. We noted a small Russian advance of 200 to 300 meters along a tree line west of Nikolaeva-Daryina. Additionally, there were frontline adjustments made in the Byakhovo and Obukhovka, that's the one near Koreniva, areas. Satellite images confirmed that Ukrainian forces still occupy Naidionov and are northeast of Hitrovka, and suggested there was recent fighting in the area of Byakhovo. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported that Russia, quote, continues to raze their villages and cities to the ground in the Kursk Oblast, carrying out 19 airstrikes and dropping 39 bombs. Moving to my home, Ukraine. Despite carrying out 187 assaults, Russian forces were unable to make many gains. The situation is interesting in Vovchansk, where it appears, after the Russian withdrawal from the machine aggregate plant, Ukrainian forces are starting to push Russian forces out of the main district. It's too early to adjust the map, as Russia and Ukraine frequently trade the same bomb-blasted buildings near the hospitals and the apartments north of the city park. Earlier this month, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine reassigned Brigadier General Mikhailo Drapatый, who has been the chief of the Kharkiv Operational Strategic Group since May, as the new commander of the Luhansk Operational Strategic Group. The change was made between September the 5th and the 10th, reportedly due to the stabilization of the situation in the Kharkiv region. Drapatый will be responsible for troops defending the region from Bilogorivka in the Luhansk Oblast to Toretsk and New York in the Donetsk region. In the Kharkiv Oblast, southeast of Kupiansk, Russian forces made additional gains near Pischane, advancing through unfavorable terrain for both combatants. Russian troops are suffering significant casualties to advance along tree lines and through the open fields to the villages on the east bank of the Oskil River. To the south, in the Luhansk Oblast, Russian forces made marginal gains to the eastern edge of Makiyivka. There were numerous reports of Russian advances in Toretsk and east of Pokrovsk, but geolocation indicated all of these reports were already mapped by our team. There were unconfirmed reports of a Russian advance in the direction of the mine complex between Sukurine and Hirnek, but we could not confirm the report. It was a similar situation near occupied Vodene, where reports of a Russian advance northeast of the village were already mapped. The line of conflict was adjusted north of Morphopil in the Zaporizhia Oblast, based on the geolocation of Russian troops in the dachas north of the settlement. This does not represent a new advance, and the dachas have been in the grey area since 2022. In Crimea, Russian occupiers continue to build defense structures around the Kerch, also known as the Crimea Bridge. Over 30 barges are serving as barriers, and recently Russia started placing pilings and other underwater obstacles on the approaches to the bridge. Pictures emerged showing that another large barge had been anchored in the middle of the shipping lane, requiring all vessels transiting between the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov to navigate around it. In occupied Sevastopol, Russian occupiers were forced to close the pediatrics emergency room at City Hospital No. 5 because of a lack of doctors. Since September 2022, the emergency room was staffed by a paramedic, and now no one is available. In Russia, things are still exploding while Ukraine continues its search and rescue operation for the missing Kremlin Red Line. Maxar released high-resolution satellite photos of the still-burning ammunition depot in Tarapets, which was severely damaged by a Ukrainian drone attack. The compound was mostly shrouded in smoke and fire. The analyst group Tochny reviewed the images and determined that 13 of the 41 newer bunkers in the eastern part of the depot have been severely damaged or destroyed. Others appeared undamaged, about half couldn't be viewed due to the smoke. Yesterday, there was another magnitude 2.8 earthquake registered at 17:56 hours Moscow time, the 19th one over 2.0 since the first major blast was recorded around 0400 hours. NASA fire information for resource management systems showed that the depot was still on fire. Russian propagandist Anastasia Kashevarova claimed there was a garrison of 200 Russian soldiers at Tarapets and, quote, dozens were likely killed during the attack. On the same night of Ukraine's strike on Tarapets, a Ukrainian missile or Polyanitsa hybrid drone struck the barracks at the military base near Pachep in the Bryansk region. The base borders an ammunition depot with at least 58 storage sheds and is the home of the 856th Self-Propelled Artillery Regiment, 144th Guards Motor Rifle Division. The video of the missile strike confirmed that the weapon was turbine-powered and no air defense was active.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War Podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
It's time for today's Theaterwide update. American Ryan Ruth, 58, was charged with being a felon in possession of a weapon and for tampering with the serial numbers after he was arrested on Sunday near a Florida golf course owned by former President and Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. Initially labeled as a second assassination attempt against candidate Trump, federal agents reported that Ruth never had, quote, line of sight on Trump, was in an area where he would never be able to see the former president, and never fired his gun. A Secret Service agent doing a perimeter check as Trump moved through the golf course discovered Ruth and fired one shot at him. Ruth took off on foot but was quickly captured. It was widely reported that Ruth fought for Ukraine, was a recruiter for the International Legion of Ukraine, or was a member of the Azov Brigade. None of these claims are true. In 2023, Ruth was featured in a story by the New York Times about con artists and grifters trying to profit from the Russia-Ukraine war. In mid-2022, he was featured in an interview by Newsweek Romania, where he admitted that the armed forces of Ukraine rejected his offer to fight due to his age and lack of military experience. Here is Ruth in his own words.
And what are you doing here in Ukraine?
My initial goal was to come and fight. I think, everybody around the globe should be motivated to come here and support the Ukrainians and to support the army, no matter what gender, age, anything. Everybody should be here supporting the army. But I'm 56, so initially they were like, well, I have no military experience. So they're like, you're not an ideal candidate. So they said, not right this minute.
By mid-2023, Ruth was on the radar of Kyiv and the International Legion, with numerous posts in recruiting chats and message boards warning that he was not a representative of the armed forces or the International Legion, and that he was making impossible promises to streamline visa applications for foreign fighters. The United States inched closer to a government shutdown, with Speaker of the House Mike Johnson unable to pass his temporary funding bill. The bill failed 202 to 220, with 2 Republican congresspersons voting present. If a continuing resolution is not passed by September the 30th, the US government will be shut down. This would stop the shipping of military aid to Ukraine, the provision of intelligence, and any ongoing training programs for Ukrainian military personnel. Johnson is under tremendous bipartisan pressure to pass a so-called clean resolution. Lawmakers in the House of Representatives are pressing the Pentagon to immediately start training 10 more F-16 pilots for Ukraine, reporting that by December Ukraine will have more F-16s than available pilots to fly them. Worse, the lack of pilots will put the fleet at risk, with aircraft outnumbering the personnel able to ferry them to different locations to prevent Russian ground attacks. This has been a known issue since the spring of 2024. US General James Heckler, the head of US Air Forces in Europe and NATO-allied Air Command, said that Ukrainian ground crews for the F-16 were performing well. Quote, "We've trained a lot of Ukrainian maintainers, and from all accounts, when I talk to the instructors that are training them, they catch on very quickly. Just like Ukrainians learned the M777 howitzer quickly, and HIMARS quickly, and the Patriot air defense system quickly, and the Bradley fighting vehicle quickly." He added that after Ukraine lost an F-16 in combat, the US offered its assistance, but Kyiv has yet to indicate, quote, "if they take us up on that offer." It was widely reported that United States Vice President Kamala Harris will meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky next week when he travels to New York to address the United Nations General Assembly. There has been no confirmation from the White House or the Harris campaign about the meeting. Former President Trump told reporters he would, quote, "probably meet with Zelensky," but gave no additional details. The US Helsinki Commission condemned the continued impasse on permitting Ukraine to strike military targets within Russia. Here is Professor Timothy Snyder.
Part of being an empire is controlling the discourse. And to a large degree, the Russians have been able to control the strategic discourse, setting up for us new rules in war, which have never existed before. Like, for example, that when you invade another country, the entire war should take place on the territory of the country you've invaded. No one has ever said that before because it's completely absurd, and yet somehow it's been accepted in the United States as normal that this war should be fought on Ukrainian territory. There is no precedence for that kind of idea. Another idea that the Russians have that we've accepted is that it's normal, for example, when you and I were in Kiev, for ballistic missiles to rain down on the city where we were trying to do normal business, but it's somehow not normal for ballistic missiles from Ukraine to go into Russia. Why is that? Why is it normal for one country and not for another? It has a great deal to do with imperial thinking, which we have accepted. There's something precious, special, etc. about Russia, and somehow it's okay for Ukrainians to be victims because they always have been victims. We need to investigate, I think, that understructure of thinking, which I believe has guided our policy in the wrong way. I believe the Ukrainians are right about something that they're hard-pressed to convince us of. The Russians are going to negotiate peace when they believe they are losing. And so if anyone is serious about negotiation, that person should be trying to get the Russians into a position where they think they might be losing. The Ukrainians get that, but they're having a really hard time making us understand that pairing. So when they talk about a victory plan or a peace plan, what they mean is together the West and Ukraine do enough to get Russia to a point where it might negotiate sincerely. They're not there now.
The truth matters. No lies detected. Our entire team has been saying this for over 30 months. In his strongest statement to date, outgoing Secretary-General of NATO Jens Stoltenberg said that enabling Ukraine to launch long-range missile strikes into Russia would not be a red line that leads to escalation. Quote, "He has not done so," quick sidebar, he means autocrat Vladimir Putin, because he realizes that NATO is the strongest military alliance in the world. They also realize that nuclear weapons and nuclear war cannot be won and should not be fought. And we have made that very clear to him several times. The Kremlin called Stoltenberg's comments, quote, dangerous. The comment comes days after Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov became irritated by a reporter's question about Russia's invisible red lines. Quote, "I'm tired of commenting because nothing surprises me, but Americans have already stepped over the line that they set up. They're encouraged, and Zelensky certainly sees it and uses it. They need to understand they're joking about our red lines. Don't joke about our red lines. They perfectly know where they are." Wait, the United States set up the red lines? As for not laughing at Russia's red lines, Ukraine has conducted a 46-day-long search and rescue operation in the Kursk Oblast looking for Russia's red lines, and has yet to find them. German defense company Rheinmetall planned to send 10 modified Leopard 1A5 tanks with modern Skyranger short-range air defense turrets has been put into doubt due to a lack of funding. The Skyranger is designed to target slower aircraft such as helicopters, ground attack aircraft like the Su-25, and drones. However, Germany did announce a three-way transfer of PZH-2000 155mm self-propelled howitzers, or SPGs, to Ukraine. Qatar has agreed to purchase 12 of the new RCH SPGs from Rheinmetall, and as part of the agreement, 24 PZH-2000s will be transferred to Ukraine after refurbishment and modernization. An analysis of pledged military hardware versus deliveries found that of the 864 main battle tanks allocated to Ukraine starting in 2022, 589 have been delivered. The author of the analysis noted that the number is higher, as some nations have classified their deliveries to Ukraine. France is expected to deliver the first Mirage 2005 fighter jets to Ukraine by the end of 2024. Paris is modifying the aircraft at Kazan Air Force Base to support ground attack missions. In the spring of 2024, French President Emmanuel Macron announced that France would be transferring Mirage fighter aircraft to Ukraine, and pilot training had already started. Our War Crimes and Human Rights section can cover difficult topics, including torture, gender-based violence, war crimes, and violence against children. Today's report includes graphic content about war crimes. If you're uncomfortable with these topics, I recommend you skip this section. There are timestamps in the podcast description. On Saturday, Russia and Ukraine exchanged 103 prisoners of war. The day before, there was another exchange of 49 prisoners. The United Arab Emirates negotiated both transfers. The group on Saturday included 82 enlisted personnel and 21 officers, including defenders of the Kyiv and Donetsk regions, Mariupol and Azovstal, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kharkiv regions. On Friday, a video showed an emaciated Ukrainian former prisoner weeping uncontrollably, clutching a small piece of paper. It was a note from his sister that he hid from his Russian captors for over 2 years. We'll link to the video in today's situation report, and there is more information in the podcast description. Have a tissue. Videos and pictures of recently released Ukrainian prisoners of war show they are emaciated and suffering from diseases caused by maltreatment and torture. During the most recent prisoner exchange, one Ukrainian soldier appeared terrified of his mother's touch, refusing to look her in the eyes. It's a tough video to watch, but there's no way that I can convey his fear of being touched using only words. Russian human rights activist Vladimir Osechkin, who runs the website gulagu.net from Paris, wrote that Russia only exchanges the most presentable Ukrainian prisoners to avoid outrage in the international community. The next two segments will discuss war crimes, some in graphic detail. On Monday, pictures appeared on social media of a Ukrainian soldier who had been bound and executed by Russian soldiers with a broadsword through the chest. The pictures showed the man left lying in the road, the sword sticking out of his blood-soaked shirt, with the words "For Kursk" written on the sword's blade. Our team was able to authenticate the picture and geolocated the execution site in Novogrodivka. The location is in the southern part of the settlement, which has been under Russian control for weeks. We'll link to the pictures in today's report, because our editorial team believes it is critical to share them due to the cruelty of the act. Ukraine's ombudsman Dmytro Lubinets confirmed that Kyiv had appealed to the International Committee of the Red Cross and the United Nations to investigate the war crime and take action. Quote, "The level of barbarism and bloodthirstiness is impossible to comprehend." Since Ukrainian forces withdrew from the left bank of the Dnipro River, Russian drone operators have been going on what they call safari, intentionally hunting down Ukrainian civilians in the Kherson region and posting their war crimes on social media. In our assessment, the lack of response from the West for acts such as the bombing of the Okhmadit Children's Hospital has convinced the Kremlin that individual war crimes can be committed with impunity. Many of the attacks occur in Antonivka and the city of Kherson. No one is safe, including women, children, pensioners, and emergency service workers. In one video, a car parked outside a bakery in Antonivka is attacked, with the driver getting out and running away. In early September, a Russian drone operator dropped a mortar round on a biker in Kherson. There have been multiple attacks on civilians for weeks, and the city of Kherson has turned into a ghost town, with residents afraid to leave their homes.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War Podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Now it's time to talk about Russian Mobiks, Mobilization and the Mir. Autocrat Putin signed an order that will increase the Russian military to 1.5 million active duty members, adding another 180,000 soldiers. Russia will have the second largest active-duty military on the planet, behind China. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the increase is being made due to the extremely hostile environment on our western borders and instability on our eastern borders. This demands appropriate measures to be taken. Well, you could end the, quote, extremely hostile environment on your western borders today. Go home. Growing frustration from Russian male bloggers is boiling over as battlefield losses increase. Specialists are moved into infantry units for human wave assaults, and the Russian Ministry of Defense ignores its systemic problems. The loss of the Russian ammunition depot in Tarapets started another wave of criticism. Quote, "They lie and they make mistakes. How much longer can this go on, guys? Have our brains and consciences been completely corrupted?" wrote one male blogger, adding, quote, "An arsenal for the complex storage of missiles, ammunition and explosives that meets the highest world standards was destroyed by a UAV fragment. That is what the authorities are reporting to the media." Responding to the Russian rant, retired United States Lieutenant General Mark Hertling wrote on Twitter, also known as X, quote, "During multiple visits to Russia when commanding US Army Europe and Africa, this is exactly what I saw. It indicates the corruption and dysfunction in both the Russian military and government. Putin is an authoritarian kleptocrat. It is impossible for Russia to adapt." Highlighting these problems, Colonel Yevgeny Luzhbin was arrested in the occupied city of Mariupol for, quote, "bribery on an especially large scale." A commander of Motor Rifle Regiment 95-482, Luzhbin issued fines for infractions such as drinking alcohol while on duty or abandoning posts, and then kept the money for himself. Moscow alleges that he required all unit members to write requests to be voluntarily transferred to an assault unit, essentially a death sentence, with no date. He would then use those statements to extort his subordinates for money. But wait, there's more. This isn't Luzhbin's first time being arrested for bribery. In 2018, he was tried for, quote, "unjust enrichment" and forced to leave the Russian Federation Armed Forces. He received his commission back in 2022. Our team reviews some horrific content that we never share with our audience. Among them are previously domesticated pigs that are now running wild, eating the corpses of dead Russian soldiers. This isn't a few videos either, there's a lot. A recent drone video we can share showed how aggressive the pigs have become. A wounded Russian soldier was trying to crawl into a tree line, and a pig was already stalking him. The soldier is shot at with small arms, and the pig runs off, and that's where the video ends. In Russia, if a soldier's body isn't found, there's no payment. The 12th Special Operations Brigade Azov captured 3 Russian soldiers by posing as Russians. In an extended video that we link to, a Ukrainian soldier stumbles on the trio, who had been abandoned by their commander who had gone to look for food. They had a cordial conversation for a few minutes, asking about how long they'd been at the position, why the Russian troops didn't have a working radio, and why they weren't carrying their weapons. He then declares, quote, "You've ended up in the hands of a purebred Ukrainian." The Russian soldiers were unfazed and immediately surrendered. In economic news, after international outrage, Russian state media agency TASS reported that the International Monetary Fund has postponed reintegrating Russia into the IMF indefinitely. Moscow was told the decision was made due to the, quote, "technical unpreparedness of the mission to conduct consultations." We've provided extensive coverage on Russia's collapsing civil aviation industry and commercial airlines. In an Orwellian announcement, the Russian Ministry of Industry and Trade has set a goal to create an export program for Russian aircraft by 2028. The head of the department, Anton Alekhanov, told Russian state media, quote, "Perhaps I am getting ahead of myself, but it is obvious that by 2027-2028 we will need to prepare serious proposals for our management regarding entering the international market." Oh, you're absolutely getting ahead of yourself. Autocrat Putin is slightly more forgiving than Darth Vader. We suggest a dramatic increase in bribes without a paper trail, or prepare for your 2027 arrest. We end today covering Russia's expanding war of aggression. The defense ministers of Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania and Slovakia released a joint statement calling for the NATO alliance to prepare a, quote, collective answer to the increasing number of airspace violations by Russian drones and missiles. Since 2022, the airspace of Romania, Poland, Latvia and Moldova, not a NATO member, has been violated by Russia. In some cases, drones have flown over 70 kilometers deep into NATO territory. Richard Scholz, a European Parliament MP from Estonia, warned that Hungary was endangering European security. Here is Scholz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hungary's decisions to simplify travel for Russian and Belarusian nationals is not just a breach of trust. It is a direct challenge to the security of the European Union. The integrity of the Schengen area itself may be jeopardized by Orban's unilateral measures at a time when the EU is united in response to Russia's war in Ukraine. By opening the door to individuals from hostile countries against the EU, Hungary is compromising our collective safety. These relaxed visa rules create dangerous loopholes, allowing unvetted individuals, potential spies, saboteurs and agents of disinformation easy access to our borders. Let me be clear, this is not about national sovereignty. This is about the security of the EU. If Hungary refuses to align with the common EU approach, I urge its neighbouring countries to reinstate border controls for the time being, priorising their own national security. Europe's unity must not be sacrificed on the altar of appeasement, especially at a time when the EU is on a high alert for potential acts of sabotage. Thank you.
In late July, Hungary quietly relaxed restrictions on Russian and Belarusian nationals to obtain a national card, giving them free access to the Schengen area, a group of 29 European nations. Budapest said the change was needed to support the construction of the Parks 2 nuclear power plant. Finally, the National Security Service of Armenia announced they prevented a violent Russian-backed coup d'etat. According to the Investigative Committee of Armenia, 5 Armenian citizens, 2 natives of Nagorno-Karabakh, and several other unidentified people recruited mercenaries for the Russian Armenian battalion were involved. Today's Situation Report has a lot more details about the attempt and Moscow's connection. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.